Okay, now let's learn how to do a diagonal pan. So if I have my vanishing point over here and I want to do something like this, where my character's coming into camera, here's my ground plane here. I'm going to put some rocks here, trees. I have my character walking. He's got a stick. Maybe he's in the Alps.
He's got a stalk
piece
of
of
wheat in
wheat.
his mouth.
Lederhosen. Ah, suddenly he's German. Okay, so we have a German guy walking. So now, if I want to do something in perspective, that's the only thing now becomes a little bit more difficult because I've got to take this stuff right here. And actually, these things do have to go back together. I have to move them like this, away from camera. So you see it right there? So that means that I have to then continue adding on to this background like this, adding new elements like this, and then having my guy on this panel walking. And on something like this, I would probably just, to save myself time, I would just do this. Just draw the legs. And then I would just copy my guy, make a copy of him, and erase. And I'll merge them with this new layer. And so I have this movement here. And the only thing is, I never like my characters being right in the same spot. At the very least, I would add an up and down movement to him. I would add him like this. You see the up and down movement? It just feels more natural when you go up and down as opposed to being stationary. So all I did was, I'll go back. I hit the command tool and I hit the bottom arrow key to nudge him down. You can also use the command tool and you can move your guy around a bit. So what I did was, I'll go back and show you what I did. So right now, he's in the same position, right? It doesn't look very good. So I'll do a down movement. And this is what I showed you guys in that hermit crab show. I'll move him down by holding command and the arrow key down a little bit. And so that feels like he's moving. And now I'll take this bottom layer because I have the same pose that I like already. I like that pose. And I'll just take my background and this stuff, and I'll just push them back even more like that than the previous one. And I just have to keep adding on and matching that stuff. And on this kind of thing too, you could do this. If you wanted to give it foreground, you could have like a sheep right here. I don't even know how to draw sheep, to be honest. This guy's in the foreground. And then he's going to go get smaller in each shot. He's on the foreground area, so he's going to move by faster. I'll make him a little smaller because he's going away from camera, and I'll do this. He needs to be a little higher up. A little higher like that. That feels, why are you going back down? Yeah, that feels right. And then a little smaller. So we have something passing camera. See that? Easy to do. New copy. I'll make him small again. It should be here, like that. Over here. I'm holding the command key to move him out of the way. And I'm exaggerating it a bit. My background needs to be pushed back again. Transform, smaller. I'm really exaggerating this right now. Oops, sorry guys. When I rush on these things, I end up making a lot of mistakes. And more stuff here. And then I just got to get my guy. I need to get that other drawing of him, which is on this layer here, and I'll copy up here. Pull him in. So I have him here. So remember, to create a shot following a character in movement, you'll need to slide your background in the opposite direction that your character is going. And then you can also add some foreground stuff passing in front of your character to create more depth in your shots. Okay, if you made it this far, I thought I'd show you some actual boards that I've done for some movies I've worked on to give you an idea of what these type of camera moves can look like. And in this case, we're going to look at the diagonal pan that I just showed you, where we had the guy in the lederhosen walking, and he's walking slightly diagonally towards camera, and we have things passing him. And there are obviously different locations where you can put the camera, so it can be a little bit more on axis towards them or a little bit more on the side. And the ultimate idea for any of these shots is just to put a move in when you feel it's necessary to tell the story. So in the demo I did with the guy walking, that story point could be just showing the location where the character was and where they're going to go. In this case, I'm going to show you some boards that I did for an early version of SpongeBob, The Search for SquarePants. This sequence does not exist in the movie. It was rewritten after I boarded this part, and they were rethinking the entire movie. So I did an exploratory dive into the opening of the movie when it was originally opening as a dream sequence. So we're going to look at this, and I'm showing all this stuff right now to give you context for the camera move I'm going to do. So the first part is actually a giant sweeping camera move through clouds, and we find this mysterious character on some rocks right here. And as the camera swoops around like a helicopter shot, we see this very recognizable silhouette of a character. As he unzips his outfit, the camera moves in and comes back out, and it's SpongeBob looking really too cool, James Bond-like, or sort of like, it's a James Bond vibe or even Mission Impossible vibe. And the entire purpose of this sequence, this opening shot I'm showing you, is that he's going to infiltrate this secret hideout of the bad guys. And the bad guys are always in these fortresses in a mountain. So the bad guy's location is inside of the very tippy top of this snowy mountain. And part of this thing, and the stuff you're seeing wasn't scripted, but it's just showing how hard and how far SpongeBob had to travel to get to the secret hideout. And so what I'm showing you is a couple of alternative ideas here. And I'm just going to back up a bit here and talk about this one idea to give you some more context. So after he jumps up off this cliff and he does this big spin in the air and comes into camera and lands in the snow, I started getting this idea that it might be a fun way to introduce SpongeBob swimming, as opposed to just like, how would a normal person traverse a big snowy landscape? They would put on snowshoes and start trudging up, or maybe they would ski. I thought it'd be funny to play on this theme of him swimming. And I think I got that idea originally from him climbing up this cliff face right here. And he does a leap right here and just barely hangs on for dear life and steadies himself, and then does an anticipation and zooms up in the air. And I had him flip around in the sun, and then he lands face down like this. I thought, oh, that could be the beginning of him diving into hard water, which is snow, and then coming up. So I thought he'd push this big chunk of snow up, shake his head, and then dive into the snow and then start swimming. Then I had an alternate version where he dives in and this big block of snow pops up, the camera whips out. So that's a camera move. And again, we're talking about camera moves to tell the story. And so then I thought it'd be funny if the thing opens up like an elevator, and then you hear ding, and then he steps in the snow, sinks into it, and then leaps out. And this begins him doing the freestyle swim up this mountaintop. And again, the story point is to show how far he has to travel to get into the secret base. So as he goes down over this hill, the camera moves up and we see him super far away in the distance. We move up and we can see in the distance, with the snow whipping by, this secret fortress right here. And that, or not this, but the secret fortress is actually inside of this big mountain, but that's the destination. And the shot we're going to be talking about now and showing is this shot right here where the camera zooms out and we have SpongeBob now doing the breaststroke in camera. This shot you're looking at right now, and then that's the end of the shot right there. And he backstrokes his way up a vertical cliff past a mountain goat. And then he whips around a tree, sort of like an ice cream cone. And he's doing the backstroke, by the way, in this last shot here. So he backstrokes his way up around a tree. And then he pops up and pulls out his binoculars to look at the secret hiding place, this is his target right here. So I'm going to zoom back and talk about this one camera move. And this camera move I'm showing you right now is basically the same idea that I demoed earlier with the guy walking the lederhosen. And again, the story point is to show how far he's got to travel. And then I just started leaning into the idea of how many different swimming strokes can he do, or swimming styles can he do? So I did the cliche, the freestyle, and then I thought breaststroke. And so the whole point is I'm playing off of these ideas of him swimming and just showing how hard he's working and how far he goes. And it felt like sort of a uniquely SpongeBob thing to do. And then also, if you think about it, he is from the sea, so swimming seemed to make sense. So this camera move that I'm showing you is the same thing that I did with the version with the guy walking. And if you saw the first video that I did, which was part one of the three part, this is part three. The part one was a character running into camera or a character from his point of view running, towards something. And so the same thing is applied in this shot where I have literally a 2-frame cycle on the ground. We have these anime lines right here, and I just did a 2 frames of this so that as I toggle back and forth, you can see that there's only 2 drawings here on the ground to add these speed lines. And then I have the camera in this shot. What I'm doing is I have the camera zooming up. We see SpongeBob creating a nice little path in the snow as he goes up. We're showing where he's going to be going to. And then I cut to a reverse angle and we see his tracks in the distance on these hills right here. And the camera is zooming backwards in the shot to gain into SpongeBob and have SpongeBob pass camera. So as the camera whips out, we begin to see more of his path. And then we see a fresh track right here in the foreground. And then the camera rack focuses to the foreground. We see chunks of snow here. We see his little SpongeBob feet with boots. And then the camera just passes him to see him working really hard on his breaststroke. So the part of the idea was that as he pushes really hard with his hands, he'll gain speed and come towards camera. And then as he pushes his hand forwards like this to grab the snow, he loses some momentum. So he's going to kind of drift away from camera. And then as he pulls forward to get momentum, he comes towards camera. So there are some extra things that I was figuring out in the actual action, but the camera move is the same, and the principles that I demoed earlier on are the same. What I don't have is things having objects pass in front of him like I had with the sheep. But if you look on the side, either side we have trees over here on screen left, and I think we have trees on screen right, passing camera to give a sense of things moving by, and that helps sell the idea that he's moving forward. So if you look at these trees on screen left over here, as I'm advancing the panel, we can see them passing camera. And as I was boarding this, I had to be very careful of the location of this tree in every frame. And I would click back and forth to make sure that it was receding in perspective as best as I could. And I didn't want this tree to be jumping up and down in location. So I had to make sure that I was checking each of the objects in the shot. So my recommendation to you guys who are doing these kind of shots is make sure that when you have things passing camera, like this tree over here, that you're keeping an eye on those movements specifically. And so what I end up doing when I work on these kind of shots is the first thing I'm looking at is SpongeBob primarily, making sure that his loose poses, and this is of course not animation, but his poses are working from shot to shot, and that he's doing the things that I feel are necessary in each frame. So for example, as I have the camera come past him in here, he's already pushing away, so he's gaining away from camera for a moment, and then he gains momentum and comes closer to camera. Then as he begins to slow down again, he goes for another breaststroke and pulls very hard, and he gets closer to camera. The other thing I was working on was making sure that pile of snow by his chest had a couple of frame cycles, so it felt like it wasn't just the same mound. I was just making larger in each frame. So I think I redrew it each time. And I had a 2-frame cycle on the flurry of snow going around here. And the real thing, the thing you have to do is just make sure you're toggling on and off each layer. Now this is done in Photoshop. I'm not sure how it's done in Storyboard Pro because I don't know how to use that. I got to learn that one of these days. So after I looked at SpongeBob and made sure his proportions were working and the poses were working, then I would keep an eye on trees passing by past him to make sure that they were receding away that in a way that felt natural and it felt like it was going in perspective and it wasn't either getting bigger or too small too quickly. So the recommendation is to keep your eyes on these things. The last thing I want to say is when you look at these kind of shots, they're not on camera for very long. And So what I want to say about learning these camera moves is you're doing them for specific story reasons, and you have to identify what those ideas are, and then figure out how to actually get those done in Photoshop or Storyboard Pro, or if you're working on Procreate or whatever program you're working on, and realize that you're not doing these shots because they look cool or they're fun. You're doing them because they're actually filling a story need. And in this case, the larger macro story point was that SpongeBob is traveling up this mountain and doing different strokes just to make it playful, because obviously he's a playful character and he's having a lot of fun defying gravity and physics by backstroking up here. And in this shot, for example, I had a locked off camera because I wanted to change the feeling of the whole thing. So I have a moving camera here, and then a locked off shot, just a shot of two goats sitting here in the foreground, or one goat in the foreground, one in the background, and then suddenly just paddle, 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 paddle. And that was it with the camera moves. So the whole point is, the macro point was to have SpongeBob travel enough and create enough fun in the opening shot to feel like he's actually worked very hard to get into this actual base, as opposed to a quick cut of him doing one traverse up the mountain and then he's already at the doors of the secret hideout. And then the last part is just him coming to a settle, looking through with his binoculars and pushing in, and doing something like this is just showing the audience that he has a target in mind and that is where he's going to be going. And that's the rest of that shot right there. And then we're going to look at something from the Smurfs movie that was recently done at Paramount. I worked on that. I was the head of story on that. And same idea in these shots I'm going to show you. This actually looks like SpongeBob, but it's actually a little baby book. Camera pulls wide, and we have Papa Smurf running. And this is the same idea, the diagonal pan. But in this case, I didn't put any background information on the shot. And I just had a 2-frame anime lines right here coming around camera, matching with his pose of running. And he leaps. And I will do a separate video on these boards right here to talk about the story points. But in this shot right here, same idea, diagonally moving inwards. And we reveal another Smurf, which is, this is his brother Ken punching out the evil Razamel, a young version of him, as Papa flies past camera, and he is going to do a big punch. So I went to a close-up as showing him bring his fist around, same diagonal pan, connects with his face, knocks a tooth out, and then he gets hit so hard he flies out of his boots. Now, this is an example of a character going away from camera, but it's still a diagonal pan. And so part of understanding how to do these moves is having a basic understanding of perspective. And so what do you do on a shot like this? I just thought it'd be funny that he gets hit so hard his tooth gets knocked out and he goes flying across this ancient village. And so I wanted to begin the shot with him flying away from camera. And there is this very specific story point here where I wanted to have him get hit so hard he gets knocked out of his boots. And this is just playing on an old cliche where people get hit so hard that they get knocked out of their socks or their shoes. So I thought this would be funny that he gets knocked off. And so in order to make an idea like this work, I had to make sure the camera was focusing on his feet. And I wanted to make sure that the evil wizard was going to go away in perspective, and everything that is away from camera is in soft focus. There's a very specific focal range, and it's only on the feet here. And as he goes away from camera, we see the feet fly out of the boots. And then I did a parallel flat proscenium panning shot here of him flying through buildings and hitting a brick wall into one more building and then going off camera. This is basically, I think, the second video I did on camera moves. Same principle of things passing camera. And in this case, I had him slightly advance forward from each frame. So if you look at this frame here and the next one, you see his body going forward a little bit. And that to me just helps sell the idea that he's moving in this direction as opposed to having him held perfectly still. And I think for storyboards in particular, it just feels like it's a little bit more alive as opposed to keeping him dead center. The other thing is we have to have a basic, as mentioned before, working knowledge of perspective so that as this building passes right here, we're going to be seeing this wall disappear as the camera passes this, and then seeing this big rock wall right here come up. And I had to do some very simple perspective to have it feel like the camera's passing it. So as it begins to come towards us, we have a invisible horizon line in our vanishing point here. We're looking directly at this. So the wall feels like the camera, we feel like the wall's passing us as the camera passes around here. So these little things, when you understand how to do them, can help immensely in selling a shot like this. And then I'm going to zip through all this stuff because we don't have any camera moves in here. Okay, so this is the part where Ron shows up, the guy with the long hair, the Smurf who is beloved. And I just passed a bunch of stuff that it doesn't have any action. And anyway, these rock versions of the evil Razamel pop up, and then I'm going to go into the action stuff. So we move in. He's super stoked because he wants to fight. So the first shot I had of him was running sideways, and the dialogue is his fighting style was pure silk. So I wanted to sell this idea by having him run towards the newly formed bad guys that are made out of stone. So I have a profile shot of him running, and in order to make this shot work, I did a 2-frame cycle again of the ground plane, A and B, and you can see where my mouse is right here, and on the next panel it goes right here, and the next one it's right back there. So by using those 2 frames, it gives a sense that he's actually running. And then I had one of the feet fly through the shot here. So as you see these feet, they're not flying through, but he's flying upwards. These feet are sliding in to give the impression that he has actually run to them. Then he leaps off camera. So now I have a shot where the camera is following him run up the body of this one version or one bad guy, kicks him in the face, flips around as the other guy leaps for him. And then I did a down shot, and this is basically the camera pulling away. And again, all these camera moves are being done to capture the action of this version of this Smurf fighting these bad guys. So I thought it'd be a cool shot of having the camera nice and high like a helicopter or a drone shot, and he circles around towards camera with his fist right in camera, and then he whips around, and basically we see this guy ready to receive him, and we have his fist coming straight down. He's wearing a big iron fist. So as it comes towards camera, he just cracks the guy in the head and splits him in half. He lands triumphantly. Now, as this happens, we have another guy who's mad. He's just like, he's mad as he does that. Some rocks fall off and he takes chase. So here is a shot that is from the first video where I have a character either where I showed you guys how to do a character running forward or a character running towards camera. In this case, it's a POV shot, same stuff you learned in that first video. So if you haven't seen it, look for that first video on camera moves. And in this one, it feels like a point of view, but I have the character run past camera. Same thing on the ground plane. This is a foreground element, and it's just 2 different frames of speed lines on this hill. And then these anime lines, again, 2 frames only. And so as this is happening, I have to make these bad guys run forward towards camera. And I'm also taking this background that I drew of these old buildings, and I'm slowly blowing them up in each frame while this version of Ken runs past camera. I'll make it a little bit bigger so you guys can see this more clearly. He runs past camera, and I was just, again, in this thing, I was leveraging Captain America and him throwing the shield that he's got just to play off this idea. Everybody knows Captain America, so I thought I would leverage that idea. The other thing I did was make sure that this foreground element is covering their feet to feel like they're over the hill a little bit in the shot. He runs forward, and as he runs forward, he goes from blurry to clear, so we can see Ken more clearly. Then the line is, he dispatched baddies with a Smurfy blend of elegance and lethality. So I set that up by him running, and this is a diagonal pan, if you can believe it or not. However, in this, but it's a much closer version than the guy with wearing the lederhosen. Much closer, 2-frame cycle of him running. I'm taking the background and I'm panning it by very quickly. I put a blur, a motion blur on the background to feel like it's speeding by. I'm adding a touch of color here because there's fires everywhere, and by hopefully tracking that fire in the background, we feel like it's passing camera, so we can see it way back here in the distance now. Then I had him anticipate by throwing the shield backwards and then throwing it forwards, doing a Captain America move. And off of that shot, we have it whipping past camera and going by. And so this idea is giving a sense that it's still somewhere back here is Ron, and then it passes camera. It whips right past and goes towards the bad guys. So in this shot, I did not do a camera move, and I just kept it stationary. And one recommendation I would give is that you don't have to have a moving camera on every single shot. And so as long as you're addressing the story point and it's working really well, breaking up the action can actually make the action seem more uh, well, it can feel more visceral and make a heavier impact in the visuals. If you have every shot is camera moving, camera moving all the time, the meaning behind it becomes less noticeable because everything you're watching is movement. So if you lock the camera off every once in a while and then come back to movement, those moments become more meaningful. That's what I was trying to say. So on this locked off shot, I have these bad guys running forward, and there's a bit of an adjustment here I just noticed. But the other thing I want to say is that when I'm doing these shots, I'm always asking myself, can I tell this shot? Well, first, I don't actually. I start off with like, what is the purpose of the shot? What is the idea? What is the story point? The story point here is that Ron whips the shield, and it's going to hit these two guys, and basically, like Captain America's shield, it's going to bounce between them and just break them apart like rubble. And I felt like I could tell that shot here without having a moving camera. So I had these guys run towards camera as the shield goes by, hits this guy in the ankle, and then hits this guy in the hip. And this guy reaches down and says, that's smarts. As he does, his leg falls off because these guys are made of stone. They're magical stone guys. Hits the guy in the hip and then hits him in the shoulder. And then as he's saying, he just slides apart and they collide into each other. So I've gotten rid of those two guys. These guys comment, that was a new one. They're very excited. And then I had to finish up the storyline with this guy. And I think I had to finish the story with these guys chasing him. So I had to remind everybody that he was still being pursued by that previous guy. So this shot is to do two story points. One, that he catches his shield again and is ready for battle, but also that this guy is gaining on him. So this is the same diagonal panning shot that I had where the camera is dolling with this guy as he's running. So he runs forward. Again, 2-frame cycle on the ground, 2-frame cycle of anime speed lines going by, and this guy's running 2-frame cycle on the run. I have this as an overlay, so his feet are covered up to feel like he's on the other side of this hill. He catches the shield, and the line says, I think it was safe to say that Ron was loved by everyone. He catches the shield, and he sees something, and I added this thing in here. This wasn't in the script, but I thought, in order to make this character truly lovable and super amazing, I thought that not only will he save his own kind, which is Smurfs, he'll save anything that's in harm's way. So I thought it'd be funny to add this little inchworm here that is within an inch of its life, and that it's going to be basically crushed by these two giant statue bad guys falling down on it. So I added this dialogue in here that he says, I think it was safe to say that Ron was loved by everyone. You see something, we see an inchworm inching its way across this road as all the debris is falling down. And even safer to say that Ron was loved by everyone and everything, no matter how small or insignificant they may seem. So Ron sees it, throws his shield, and leaps. And so this shot again is to show him throwing the shield and also to show that this guy is hot on his tail. That's the purpose of the shot. And again, we're looking at this from the camera moves. He throws it and then he leaps. And so part of adding camera moves to your scenes, your action scenes, is to have a variety of them. So, for example, I'm going from a diagonal pan right here where we're going slightly like this past camera, and then I'm going to go to a profile shot. So doing these different shots will help make your action feel varied and add a variety of movement to it. The story point here was that he was going to land on a shield like a snowboard, and that was the idea that I had. So I had to first have it land in a camera and then have him land on top of it and then surf on it. And the idea is that he needed his hands to pick up the little inchworm. Then we cut to the shot of this rock version falling down. We have our little worm down here. And actually in the final version that they did in the movie, they actually made this much clearer than the way I actually boarded it. So kudos to Layout for doing that. He flies in on this little snowboard, and I did this shot here, which is same idea, diagonal shot of him coming into camera. So you can tell the drawing is identical. The only thing I did was add a 2-frame little cycle to his hair, and it has eye line going from up to down, and also anime BG lines 2 frames again as he comes towards camera. And the reason why I did this eye line looking up and looking down is it is showing you where he's looking, and by him looking up to down, it's going to motivate the camera move that I'm going to add into next. So by doing this, we're almost rewinding the camera a bit to show what he was looking at, which is the underside of this giant foot, and having the camera pan down to that inchworm. And so that's what this camera move was, or I'm sorry, that's what this eye line was. It's showing he's looking at something intently. And the reason why we are in much tighter than we have been before, every other shot was a full body shot of him, if you can see in this, is that we need to register his eye line very clearly. So by cutting to a medium close-up or this close-up, it allows the audience to see without a doubt what he's doing, and he's looking at something falling. And by doing this, it motivates the move, as I said before. So now we have the inchworm, and I went to a low angle shot, which is the same thing we learned again in this video, where we have the foreground element here. It's a 2-frame cycle. I've got him nice and low. And the reason why I put this camera so low is that I wanted him to scoop up the worm, and I wanted to have the worm pass camera very closely because I wanted this action to be read very clearly. It's a very quick scene, or I should say, yeah, it's a very quick scene, and I wanted this to register very quickly. We also have the bad guy in the background getting closer and closer. So I know in the back of my mind, as I was boarding this, I have to figure out how to conclude the action of this guy being taken out, which you'll see. So I had an idea for this already. And I was basically going to have him, I'm going to have this guy who's falling down collide into this guy. So I just gave it away. So low angle, and to give a sense of movement, there's 2 things we're doing here. We're having him get closer to camera in this shot. And the other thing we're doing is we're having these large pieces of stone, which is the stone versions of this Razamel, pass camera and go away. So like I said at the end of the video, you want to have your character coming forward, and you want to have the background elements going away, and showing those 2 things at the same time will give a sense of forward progression. So as he comes forward, the inchworm is super big in camera, and I did 2 frames of this, at least 2 frames before he grabs it. And the reason why I did 2 panels is that I felt like one, and then if he grabbed it immediately, I think you're just going to miss the action. I wanted to be very clear about that. So I added 1 more frame. And the other thing I did, it's a very subtle thing, is we're having him in daylight here. And as he comes in the shot, you can see the shadow falling across his face. And this is trying to imply, hopefully successfully, that he's actually passing underneath that giant piece of leg that's going to collide on the ground. And I'll just dial back really fast to give you guys a reminder. This is that leg. It's casting a shadow on the ground. He comes in, he's underneath, like he's going under the bridge. He grabs it. I have him smile in the shot. Oh, last little thing, detail, is I had these sparks on the ground. Again, 2-frame cycle. So the entire time I'm doing this in Photoshop, every other panel, I'm just toggling A and B on and off to make it very easy for me. Same thing with the guy in the background. He's on a 2-frame cycle also. He grabs the earthworm, and as he grabs it, I start introducing that giant leg in the background to do one of those classic shots of someone just, making it in the nick of time. And I didn't have it land immediately. I want to make sure that we could really clearly see the worm in the foreground and then the collision in the background. And then I have to finish this guy's story. So same idea, running towards camera, he reacts and the camera whips out. So as this guy stops, because he's being met by the bottom half torso of that leg that just hit the ground, he hits it, falls forward and breaks in half. And then I went to a very flat proscenium camera move that you learned in the first video on camera moves. And the reason why I did this is I really wanted to make sure the action was seen as clearly as possible. So by pulling the camera super wide and cutting on the action, we could see this torso of the guy who had already fallen, and that was right where Ron actually went underneath right here. This is this guy's torso right here hitting this, and he's flying forward. So he flies forward and tumbles to only having his head. And then I was just going to do a little nod to Indiana Jones. We have this head rolling forward. And remember the giant ball in the first movie rolling as Indy's running with the little idol? I thought that would be a fun little ending of this scene. So we have, again, the diagonal pan. This whole scene's about that. The ground plane again, 2-frame cycle, and anime lines, 2-frame cycle. And as this thing collides with the ground, he reacts. He hears something. He looks back. He sees his giant head rolling towards him. He grits his teeth, does an anticipation. So he leans back and then leans forward to let the head roll past him. And the camera will whip around to follow this thing. And it hits a fence and goes off the cliff. And the reason why I put a cliff here and this fence was to show that if Ron had not rolled out of the way, he would have gone off this cliff to a very most certain death. And that ends the scene. The last part I did in this was just to have him put the inchworm away. And then we have a little voiceover, or Ron says, "I love you, brother." And they fist bump with the head and the fist, or sister. And then he walks away. So the whole purpose of all the stuff that I'm showing you is to use camera moves and to cover your action when you feel like you need to do them. And for me, just as a side note, I'm not a real big action person, so I don't have a ton of scenes with this. And I would say that when you're doing action, make sure that you have really strong story needs to do action, not just action for action's sake, but a really clear reason for that. And then once you've identified each of your shots and the meaning and the reasons why they exist, then figure out what kind of camera move you need to do and to create to actually film those movements. Think about a variety of shots so that you're not always doing camera coming back on a diagonal. You want to use the profiles. You want to use shots where characters are going past camera. Think about high angle versus low angle. All of these things will give a great variety to your action and keep it really active. Well, obviously active, but also keep it fresh. And it will also, if you're thinking about your angles, you really want to make sure that you're choosing these high or low angles, like I did in this shot previously. I chose them for reasons, for specific reasons. Every other shot like this was a little bit more eye level with the characters. This one right here was much lower because the story need was that the inchworm, which is on the ground and is going to be swept up, it needed to be lower. The camera needs to be lower to see this action very clearly and to make it very dramatic. So I will make a bigger video on camera moves down the road, but hopefully this will give you guys a good idea of how to do them. And the most important thing, of course, is always to remember why you're doing them. Thanks so much. Peace out.